If there were one bodybuilder that I would work with, that I would want to work with in the history of the sport, from Larry Scott to the present, who would it be? If you want to know what that answer is, stay tuned. I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
RX Television, RxMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, your weekly question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. Whatever's on your mind, be it bodybuilding, non-bodybuilding, it is all on the table. I'm your host, Sadiq Faruqi. So glad to have you aboard on this, the 12th day of February in 2025. We are 2.5 to 3 weeks out from the Arnold Classic. A lot of reasons for excitement, obviously, when you consider you have the last two Mr. Olympias, reigning Mr. Olympia Samson Dauda, last year's Mr. Olympia, Derek Lunsford, a two-time Arnold Classic champion, William Bonac, of course, 2019 Mr. Olympia, Brandon Curry, a two-time winner himself, wild cards such as Carlos Thomas Jr. A lot of reasons for excitement and optimism for this show. It's the third straight year that they're going to the quasi-Olympia format, so very excited to bring you coverage. Preview segments, we're going to be rolling it out over the course of the next few days. And then, of course, leading into the big weekend, Dave, myself, Chris Aceto, possibly even John Hansen, and a few other notable names that I'm sure you'll know. Whichever, legends we see around, we'll get them for wrap-up segments. But it's going to be a lot of fun over the next few weeks. So if you haven't already done so, subscribe below, hit the notification bell. You're not going to miss any segments, this show or any other show, or any Arnold Classic-related content that we're going to have over the course of the next 3 to 3.5 weeks. Let's go into the questions. The first question on this show from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. Question about female competitors. What compound can help with the last bit of fat loss for a female competitor? I don't use Clen. It makes me flat and weird when I train. Same with the majority of fat burners in herbal form. Nolvadex last time gave me major hair loss, so that's out of the question as well. Can I use HGH and T3? What else would you add to that stack? Any peptides?
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of restrictions this person is putting on on us. And, I work with people out there that have a lot of restrictions. And I think sometimes, drugs like clenbuterol, they're very annoying in the first 2 weeks. They give you a headache sometimes. They give you the shakes. They make you a little, if you have a little anxiety disorder to begin with, they can give you a little anxiety. But that goes away after 2 weeks. And then you have no side effects from it. So my suggestion is, because I think clenbuterol is the most potent fat burner that you can obviously take out there. My suggestion is, instead of doing the 20 micrograms twice a day to start, like most people do 10 or do 5 micrograms. Break your pills into little chips and just take them like a couple times a day, just to get it in your system for 2 weeks. This way you're on very low dose. You'll have less side effects. And then after 2 weeks, your body's used to it. And then you can up the dosage to the effective dosage. That would be what I would try first. Because steroids don't burn fat. If you're going to ask me, should you take Anavar? Anavar doesn't burn fat. GH has a moderate fat burning effect, nothing spectacular. Obviously, T3 is going to increase your metabolism. I would definitely utilize that. I put all my competitors on Lipolyze too, because my non-stimulant-based fat burner from Species Nutrition works by different mechanisms. It's not like another one of these massive stimulant, type situations that you're going to overstimulate your body, which obviously you don't do well on, because you just said, the clenbuterol doesn't sit well with you. Lipolyze just wastes calories. And that's an important thing. And it also helps sensitize your receptors to leptin, which gets rid of your appetite. So a lot of people take Lipolyze, they love it. It kind of curbs their appetite. And then they feel warm on it, but they're not stimulated because there's no stimulants in it. Doesn't raise blood pressure, doesn't raise anxiety, doesn't raise heart rate, but it wastes calories. So I would put that in there, at least 1 pill 3 times a day. You can work up to 5 pills a day on that. And that's a good fat burner as well to stack. And I always stack that with clenbuterol and T3 if the person I'm working with is using those drugs. If they're not, I just use the Lipolyze with them and it works real well. There's really no peptides that burn fat. You could try like the GH fragment that they sell. I know TitanMedicalCenter.com has it. Some people get results on that. Some people don't. Obviously, it's the supposedly, at least theoretically, the fat burning component of GH. Whereas if you take the full GH molecule, you're going to get the fat burning and the IGF-1 releasing effect of it. So, which is the muscle building effect. So, I mean, you could use growth, 1 to 2 IUs a day, probably work well for a woman. But, sometimes it makes you really hungry. Sometimes women don't really lose that much weight on it. It's GH kind of works well on certain people, and then on other people, it doesn't seem to work quite as well as a fat burner. So, but can't go wrong with T3. Just don't overdo it. Gradually increase it. Start at 25 micrograms per day. Gradually increase it by 12.5 micrograms every 2 to 3 weeks. And if you do that slowly and don't go over 100 micrograms a day, you should have no problems with that. But I would try the clenbuterol trick that I just told you, and I would absolutely add the Lipolyze.
This next question, you might want to take a minute or two to think, possibly, even though it's going to be a minute or two dead air. But if there was any bodybuilder, past, present, from back in the day, current, dead or alive, that you would want to coach, any bodybuilder that you can get your hands on to coach, who would it be?
It's a tough question, but it's really not a tough question if you think about it. Like, who is probably the most genetically gifted bodybuilder out there who never really realized, the potential that they could have gone? And you're never going to say this guy, you're not going to think this guy in your head because he was Mr. Olympia. But I think that Sergio Oliva, the father of Sergio Oliva Jr., obviously, who won 2 Mr. Olympias, beat Arnold, would be the guy I would want to work with, because this guy did everything wrong. I can guarantee you his diet was terrible. He was a cop. I can guarantee you he didn't know what he was doing with supplement-wise or drug-wise. Can you imagine if this guy had a regimen and was put on like a structured program and actually followed it? He probably would have won 10 Olympias, because he definitely was the most genetically gifted guy up there. He was more genetically gifted than Arnold and all those guys. So, and he was bigger than everyone. So he just didn't get lean. He didn't get lean enough, at least. And when he did get even close to lean enough, his waist would be teeny tiny. I mean, that victory pose we see him hit, that's a classic shot that no one can duplicate. Lee Priest comes pretty close to that, and Sergio Jr. comes pretty close to that, but he was unbelievable because of his waistline. So, yeah, that would be the guy that would be my dream guy to work with, historically speaking. And I think that if I would have worked with him, he would have won, like I said, 10 Olympias.
Question about protecting your heart while on gear. Now, we have had a lot of questions. You've given a lot of explainers about protecting various organs while on gear, post gear, everything to protect in terms of longevity. But what about just in terms of heart health while on gear?
Well, the gear doesn't damage the heart necessarily. Obviously high blood pressure is not good for your heart. So obviously if your blood pressure is running high, especially in an off-season scenario, you would want to take some sort of a blood pressure medication. My suggestions would be an ACE inhibitor or angiotensin receptor blocker. I like the ACE inhibitors better, like ramipril, lisinopril. That's number one. If high blood pressure, you take that. It's like, if you have high estrogen, what do? You take an aromatase inhibitor, right? Or you take Nolvadex, an estrogen receptor blocker. It's a no-brainer. You have that, you take it. Same thing with blood pressure. If you have high blood pressure, you take a blood pressure medication. That should be a no thinking type of solution. And yet a lot of guys don't want to take blood pressure medications. They think it's going to cut into their gains, which it does not. They think they're going to get side effects from it. If they use the ACE inhibitors, they will not. And so they think they're not going to be able to get an erection, which that's not true either. So a lot of the reasons why guys don't use them are really not valid reasons, I think, other than the fact that they think of a blood pressure medication as something that's not anabolic and is going to build muscle in the body. But really, it's a protective type of thing. It's protective for the heart. It's protective for the kidney. I'd also be taking a good high quality, high potency, essential fatty acid supplement like omega Lyes, because those essential fatty acids in the right ratios, omega-3 and 6s, are going to help lower, right, the bad cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, and potentially raise the good HDL cholesterol. Taking a fiber supplement like Fiber Lyes is going to do the same thing. It's going to get rid of those LDL cholesterol molecules by binding them up and pulling them out of the body. And it's going to keep blood sugars lower, which obviously we know is going to be more beneficial to your bodybuilding as well. So as far as heart protection goes, that's really all you can do. I know people think, well, if I do cardio, I'm going to work my heart and it's going to put it in better shape. I got news for you. Squatting under a squat bar and deadlifting and bent over barbell rows work your heart tremendously. Okay. So you don't really necessarily have to be doing triathlete, level cardio to keep your heart in good shape. Just working out in the gym at the level of intensity that we work out at as bodybuilders is going to train your heart. The key is blood pressure control and the right nutritional supplements to keep, the cholesterol levels in healthy levels. Obviously not eating too much sugar, keep your triglycerides lower, because we know that high triglycerides are not good for the coronary arteries as well. And the most important thing is go get a cardiac CT scan, because guess what? You don't know what's going on in your coronary arteries. I just unfortunately went to another friend of mine's funeral. He was in his 40s. He was on his way to work. He died. He's not a bodybuilder, but he was a friend of mine down here. And he turns out he had an aortic aneurysm that ruptured. Could have happened to me had I not gotten a cardiac CT scan and found out I had an enlarged aorta and got it fixed. So this could have been avoidable. There was a celebration of life that I went to this weekend for this guy. And I was talking to all the people there. And I said, when I found out what happened, because they had an autopsy performed, I said, every one of you guys here that's listening, I know you're all in your 40s and 50s. Some of them, you guys are in your late 30s. Go get a cardiac CT scan. It's $100 self-pay. It takes 5 minutes, and you know what? You'll know if you have any blockages. And a lot of people have family histories, and they don't even go get checked out. I mean, Boston Lloyd, 29 years old, aortic aneurysm, died. His father has it, John. He had it fixed. Told Boston, and I don't know what happened. It was lost in translation or something like that. But the bottom line is these are avoidable deaths. And so if you want to keep your heart healthy, you got to know how your heart is doing. And the only way to know how your heart is doing is get a cardiac CT scan, get an echocardiogram regularly, and then you know. And so if you follow that advice, I think you're going to be fine.
I like this question. It is a thought-provoking question. Many times we've talked about athletes today, maybe as opposed to a few years ago, being a lot more open about gear usage. And I'm not just talking about bodybuilders, just influencers. Really anyone that has any sort of bearing in the fitness world is a lot more open about gear usage, a lot more transparent about what they're taking and what they would advise. But this is about SEO. Seems like today that nearly everyone is open about their gear usage, as mentioned, but everyone pretends that they're not using site enhancement. Is it actually uncommon now, or are people just afraid because there's a stigma about it?
It's the stigma behind it, because they think if they talk about, hey, I shoot my arms, and then people say, oh, look, he's got great arms, but that's the guy who says he shoots his arms. So those are fake arms. You can't create arms where there are no arms, okay? I used to use a little site enhancement oil, and you know what? I had muscle though. So if you have muscle that you're injecting into, it looks good, and if you don't overdo it. Everyone does site injections. You got to put the stuff someplace. So, guys shoot. So if you're shooting testosterone into your biceps or into your shoulders, that's site injection oils. The site injection oils that they sell just are basically the oil without the drug. Okay. But if you're shooting your drugs into different body parts, which everyone does, right? Because you got to put them somewhere, you're enhancing those body parts with what you're putting in there. So everyone does it. The key is, once again, there are good artists and bad artists. And some guys overdo it. And when you overdo it, it looks ridiculous. And that's why the judges mark you down. The judges judge what's up there. If it looks ridiculous, they're going to mark you down for it. If they can't tell because you're doing it in an artistic way and you're just slightly enhancing things, then you're going to get away with it. And that's the bottom line. To say that people shouldn't site inject their body parts because it's cheating is ridiculous, because where are you going to put the stuff? If you shoot it all in your glutes, you're enhancing your glutes, right? So you're putting the oil someplace that you're injecting into your body. So you might as well move it around and put it in places that will artistically and aesthetically enhance your physique. Once again, There are good artists and there are bad artists. The bad artists, it's obvious, and they get marked down, and the good artists get away with it. So be strategic about how you apply your daily or weekly shots, and don't overdo it. That's my best advice.
This is a pretty serious question, not only because he's talking about a significant injury and the impact that it's had on his life and his ability to work, but really him now questioning doctors in general, including his no longer doctor, as he states it. Said he had a pretty significant knee injury, and his now ex-doctor and ortho both said, quote, rest in ice is the preferred treatment for a torn MCL and meniscus. Obviously, if I was a pro athlete, rest in ice would not have been prescribed. This is my last straw, trusting the everyday physicians. I would like to know what anabolics would best help with recovering from this injury, and are there longevity doctors that prescribe such things, or is a trip south necessary? My family, and this is the most important, the underlying part of it all, my family needs me to be back to work ASAP to pay the bills.
I think that the most potent healing modality out there, okay, there are some anabolics. So you can take like DECA, that's an anti-inflammatory, but as far as for healing purposes, there's nothing stronger that I've ever used than BPC 157. And I say that with a smile on my face, because there really hasn't been any new drugs on the market in the last, since I started competing, right, in the 90s, that I can say is a significant advancement in what we do here as bodybuilders. But yet I could say that BPC is a significant increase and an improvement, because I think it actually helps repair stuff better than growth hormone does. You could take 200 micrograms per day of this stuff right where the body part is that you hurt. Let's say you hurt your shoulder, you can put it right in your shoulder. But let's say you hurt your foot, your ankle, you can kind of lift the skin there and put it right there. And I'm telling you, I've healed so many issues with that I have to, go out on the record and say that it's probably the most potent healing modality, and it's not that expensive. It's affordable. It's not like growth hormone is ridiculous. You can go to our good friends at TitanMedicalCenter.com, and they have the BPC 157. You can even get their Hercules combination, which is BPC 157 and TB500. Now, TB500 is another healing peptide that works really well. Personally, I think the BPC works better, but a lot of people like to combine the two, especially if you have a bad injury or something, you're in a lot of pain. I'm telling you, it works. And so what I would recommend combining it with, however, is at least 3,000 milligrams of vitamin C per day, because that's important in collagen production. And I would add my Arthrolyze joint repair formula, because you need high potency glucosamine, MSM, chondroitin sulfate to give your body the raw materials to repair, the injury. So take 5 pills twice a day of Arthrolyze, take 3,000 milligrams of vitamin C per day. Obviously, make sure you're taking in enough protein and essential fats. And then on top of that, you take your BPC, and I think you're going to get some really nice results, and you should be able to get back in action without having to spend a fortune on growth hormone, which probably won't even fix the problem the way the BPC will.
Question about injecting. Is it really necessary to do daily injections? How much of a difference does it make compared to 2 to 3 times weekly?
Look, the reason why I was probably one of the people who started the every other day protocol, because guys used to take a shot once or twice a week. And what I found was, when I started doing 1,000 milligrams of testosterone a week, I said, you know what? I don't want to take 2 massive shots. There's too much oil. I'm just going to do it every other day. So I would divide up my 1,000 milligrams of testosterone and my 400 or 500 milligrams of EQ, and I would divide it into every other day injections, and whatever it worked out to, 1 cc of this and 1 cc of that. And it worked well, because what would happen is, even though they're long-acting compounds, they still have peaks and valleys. So if you always have something in your system, you're going to get kind of this effect, and you're going to have a high level. Whereas if you take like a fast-acting compound, you get a high, and then you get a low, and then you get a high, and you get a low. So long-acting compounds, if you take them all in one time a week, you're going to get a high, and then it's going to start coming down. So there's at a point where it's going to get low. If you take it twice a week, you get a high, it comes down, and then you get back up here. But if you take it every other day, you kind of get a nice almost straight line, because they are long-acting. If you go every day, that line doesn't straighten out anymore. Okay, if you're using a fast-acting compound like test suspension, Winstrol, or even test propionate, it might actually benefit you to take it every day. But I don't use propionate with anyone or myself. I never used it because it fucking hurts and it makes you feel like you have the flu. With Winchell, nowadays, guys are taking, they're almost taking, most people take pills. They don't even take the shots anymore. So there's really, and no one takes test suspension anymore. So really, if you're taking long-acting compounds, every other day is probably the best way to apply it. There's no need to take it every single day. It's not going to benefit you in any way.
We'll take one more question. And this one, I think, is very relevant, not only to just in general a bodybuilding audience, but in particular our bodybuilding audience, because you do get a lot of questions about longevity, about staying, longevity in the sport, but then in terms of overall health, post bodybuilding as well. And I think this is a question that a lot of our audience members are going to be interested in, because again, when we talk about longevity, the question is about longevity, your keys to longevity. Aside from just genetics, what are your keys to longevity? And again, you can apply that to, lengthening the time of your career as a bodybuilder, or just in terms of maintaining your overall health post bodybuilding.
Because of genetics, that really is what's going to dictate longevity. When I was bodybuilding, I said to myself, I want to make the maximal gains that I could possibly make. So I'm going to eat perfectly. I'm going to train as heavy and as intensely as I possibly can, within taking enough rest days. I'm going to take the right drug protocols. I'm going to leave no stone unturned. And back when I was doing it in the mid to late 90s into the early 2000s, I used every, bit of wisdom that I had at the time. I wish I knew what I knew today. Maybe I would have even been better, but your body's going to break when it's going to break. Unfortunately, some people just genetically are more resilient than other people. Obviously, when I was training, I was lifting insanely heavy weights and my body was fine, very resilient. As I got older and my genetics kicked in, I got the Italian, arthritis genetics. And so, you can't fight that. And whatever other, issues I have, and those are just genetics that you have to deal with. For some reason, in some people, their genetics surface earlier in their careers, which ruins their careers. In me, it didn't happen until later, down when I started hitting like my late 40s and early 50s. That's when things started, happening more. So I obviously had shoulder issues my whole career, but I was able to work through that. There's no way to predict, or there's nothing you can do, because if you play it safe and you don't lift heavy, you'll never achieve the level of muscularity and physique development that you want. You might last longer, but you might be a mediocre version of yourself. So you have to give 100% and just let the cards fall where they may. Some people last longer than others because their genetics are such, and other guys, they have a brief career, but they look amazing for that brief career. And that's just the way it goes. I mean, look what happened to Dennis Newman. The guy I remember when he won the USA Championships in New Orleans, they said, this guy is going to be the golden boy of the sport. He's going to have a great career. He's going to make a lot of money. And then the 2 months later, he's diagnosed with leukemia. So his genetics, decided that, nope, this is not what we're going to be doing. Mike Francois won his first 2 pro shows. He won the Arnold Classic on his birthday, won $100,000. And, eventually had, such a severe case of colitis, he had to have his colon removed, and he decided, that's it. I'm not bodybuilding anymore. So you just don't know what's going to happen. And there's no way to prevent it. You can't play it safe, because if you play it safe, you'll never achieve what your potential is. So you got to give 100% and just trust in the process, say your prayers, and hopefully, you'll make it through your entire career at your best, but there's always going to be setbacks. And that's what life is about. Tony Robbins, I was watching a seminar of his the other day, and he said, without setbacks, he goes, what would life be? It wouldn't even be a challenge. He goes, you wouldn't learn anything. It wouldn't be enjoyable. There would be nothing to overcome. It would just be too easy and you'd get bored. And he's right. So give 100%. Don't worry about, what could go wrong. Because if you think about what could go wrong, you're going to create that in your life. Think about what you want, where you want to go with it, what you want to achieve, and keep that thought in your head and never deviate from that vision that you have of yourself, of your greatest self that you could achieve. And if you keep that in your head, you'll achieve it.